Hey everyone, welcome to episode 7 of Got a Story for You. I'm Phil Giunta, and before I delve into today's reading, I just want to share a few cool things with you. Much like the last story I read, Don't Go Fussing Over Me, tonight's tale also comes from the Middle of Eternity speculative fiction series. These are anthologies of science fiction, fantasy, and paranormal tales that were written by, well, at the time, as yet unpublished or burgeoning writers who were just launching their careers. We started in 2014 with Somewhere in the Middle of Eternity, and we continued in 2016 with Elsewhere in the Middle of Eternity. Some of the participating writers include Stephen H. Wilson, founder of Firebringer Press, the publisher of this series. They're a small press based out of the Baltimore area. Stuart Roth, Susanna Riley, Lance Woods, Michael Kreitzer, Daniel Patrick Corcoran, Amanda Headley, April Wells, Melissa Carter Miller. These are the writers that are featured in these first two books, with cover art by Michael Reel. And in addition to these fantastic and very vivid covers, Michael also supplied for us a black and white illustration for every story in the books. For the first two books, that's about 27 stories total, so Mike certainly had his work cut out for him. And here's just one example of Michael's sketch work, black and white sketch work for the stories. Fantastic and beautiful artwork. So very proud of this series. The mission of this whole Middle of Eternity series, again, was to feature the works of up-and-coming writers, and that mission continues with book 3. Now, I'm making an announcement here, so I'm very happy to announce the upcoming third volume in the Middle of Eternity series called Meanwhile in the Middle of Eternity. Again, with cover art by Michael Reel. And again, just like the first two books, I actually have 3 stories in this. And in fact, over the next, I would say, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, episodes of Got a Story for You, I'm going to be reading my tales from the first 2 books for you. So I've started with last week's Don't Go Fussing Over Me. We're going to do another one tonight. And as we move into the future episodes of Got a Story for You, some of these stories are going to be 5, 8, 10, 12,000 word stories. So I'm going to break them up into multiple parts. So to keep the videos a little shorter, try to keep them around the 20-minute mark. But anyway, back to the series. Meanwhile, in the Middle of Eternity, Book 3 will be premiering at the Farpoint Science Fiction Convention in Hunt Valley, Maryland in February of 2021. Our original goal was to launch at the Shore Leave 42 Science Fiction Convention in this July, in Hunt Valley, Maryland. But the pandemic is obviously causing a lot of havoc with events being canceled and postponed, so Shore Leave has postponed their con till next summer, 2021, July of 2021. So the next viable convention was Farpoint in February. So we will be launching Meanwhile in the Middle of Eternity there. And in addition to some of the core writers who have been with us since books 1 and 2, we will be adding writers Christopher Ux and Bart Palomaro, who are both my fellow members of the Greater Lehigh Valley Writers Group, Julie Feeden, Peter Ong, and Sean Julinger, all bringing a variety of fantasy, science fiction, Twilight Zone, and horror tales. This is going to be a fantastic book and a wonderful addition to the series. We're going to crowdfund this book using Indiegogo, I believe, and I'll have more information on that as time draws near. But very excited to launch Meanwhile in the Middle of Eternity in February. So anyway, back to our story of the evening, which is featured in Elsewhere in the Middle of Eternity. It's called My New Shiny. And to give you a little summary of that story, after liberating a warlock from an antique decanter, a homeless man is given the opportunity to go back in time and change his life. But will he make the right decision, or will he squander his chance by seeking revenge on those who ruined him? That is our story for the evening, called My New Shiny. I hope you enjoy it. Across the street from the alley, a burning delivery van exploded. It was parked in front of the hardware store, which was also ablaze. Both had been vandalized during the looting. In the distance, Fading sirens and shouting voices were punctuated by occasional gunfire. The madness was moving south. 2 days ago, a Hispanic college student was gunned down by a black cop, simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. This sparked one of the most explosive riots in the city's history. Simon Ramirez opted out of the violence. It wasn't his problem. As the world around him collapsed into mayhem, he sat quietly on a metal folding chair that one of the looters had used to smash the window of the antique shop next door to his home. His home being the alley, of course. Simon glanced up just as his roommate hurried around the opposite corner and pressed himself against the wall of the pizza shop. Old Ralph had been living on the streets for over a decade. An industrious sort, he made a few bucks on odd jobs like washing cars or fetching dry cleaning for local businessmen. Most of the cash that greased Ralph's palms slipped into the register at the liquor store. But not tonight. No, tonight all booze was free. After catching his breath, Ralph peeked out from behind the wall. Assured that no one had followed him, he hurried over to Simon. "Hey, it's some crazy shit tonight, huh?" Ralph laughed in a raspy rattle from a nearly toothless mouth. He nodded to the object in Simon's grimy hands. "What's that?" Simon slid a finger along the ornate embellishment that wrapped around the gem-studded metal decanter. "It's my new shiny." Ralph held up the bottle of vodka he'd scavenged from the liquor store after the looters had dispersed. "Split it with you." "You know I don't drink." "Well, then why steal a decanter?" "I didn't steal it. It was laying on the sidewalk in front of the antique shop, and it called to me." "It called to you?" Frowning, Ralph leaned forward and turned his good ear toward the vessel. "I don't hear nothing. You've been on the streets too long, Simon. Why not grab something valuable like a Blu-ray player or a laptop computer? The electronics shop was the first to get hit." "I'm homeless, Ralph, just like you. Where would I use those?" "You could sell them." "Even in this town, who's going to buy from a filthy, disfigured bum?" "Well, what about food? The mini-mart on the corner is smashed wide open. Owner was shot dead. Everything's for the taking." Ralph held up 2 bulging plastic bags. "I grabbed me a bunch of breakfast sandwiches, soft pretzels, and more. You want some?" "I get better food from the shelter on 7th without stealing it." Ralph shook his head. "I don't understand you, kid. Out here in the wild, we need to take every advantage we can get." He sauntered away toward the end of the alley. "Enjoy your new shiny. I'm going to go drink my vodka and pass out. Wake me up when the riot's over." "Good night, Ralph." Simon turned his attention back to the metal decanter, and the 2 rows of red gems spaced evenly around its polished surface. Then he noticed something odd. While most of the jewels reflected the lambent flames of the burning van, 2 of them remained dark. Simon placed his forefinger and thumb on those stones and pressed. Within seconds, the decanter was vibrating in his grasp, but it wasn't until his fingertips began to burn that he finally dropped it. The decanter struck the ground with a clang and rolled across the alley until it disappeared into the shadows. Simon moved to retrieve it, but drew back as the air filled with smoke. He stumbled over his chair just as a tall man stepped out of the shadows, arms flailing. "Damn it!" The stranger launched into a brief coughing fit before regaining his composure. "I can't believe they added smoke. It's so cliché." As the air began to clear, Simon could just discern the man's narrow face, dirty blonde hair, and neatly trimmed goatee. He was dressed entirely in black from turtleneck to boots. In the dim lighting, it was impossible to determine his age, but he appeared young. "Who the hell are you?" Simon asked. The man narrowed his eyes at him. "You are the one?" "What?" "The one who released me. Try to keep up, man." Simon picked himself up and brushed off his clothes, as if it would make a difference. "Yeah, I guess. I'm Simon." He extended a hand. "Simon Ramirez." The man accepted the gesture and smiled. "Career rocked, at your service." Simon's eyes went wide. "Are you a genie?" "Don't be absurd. I'm a warlock. Genies are tricksters. They prey upon your every desire by using your wishes against you." "But you live in that decanter." "Like Hades, I do. My coven imprisoned me in that thing right after I stopped, what's-his-name with the little mustache and his goose-stepping morons from Germany. Simon thought for a moment. Wait, you mean Adolf Hitler? Rock snapped his fingers. Right, him. You fought in World War II? Not exactly. The Nazis unwittingly executed some of my kind, so I took matters into my own hands by manipulating events here and there to expedite their defeat. And what did I get from my heroic efforts? Rock bunched up his face, and when he spoke again, his voice was high and mocking. You know we are forbidden to interfere in human history. You must be punished. His features returned to normal. So they banished me into that decanter. Well, that was nearly 70 years ago. Rock seemed unfazed by the news. What city is this? Philadelphia. The United States. Clearly that decanter was well traveled. I wonder if any from my coven are here. Rock looked down at a tattered, grungy duffel bag sitting atop a small stack of wooden pallets. Yours? Yeah, why? Rock unzipped the bag and peered inside. Anything useful? Hey! Simon reached for the duffel bag, but Rock yanked it away and turned his back. Simon stepped around him. You can't just take... Rock held up a small purple cup with a clear lid and spout. What manner of goblet is this? It's a child's sippy cup. Do you have children? Simon lowered his gaze. No. Rock raised an eyebrow. And why do you possess a child's cup? I found it in the trash. It's in perfect condition. People are so wasteful. Simon plucked the cup from Rock's hand and shoved it into his bag. Would you please stop rummaging through my stuff? Why do you carry all of these things? They're all I have. Where is your home? You ask a lot of questions for a genie. Warlock! Whatever. Look, this is my home, okay? Simon spread his arms wide. Right now you're standing in my living room. That mattress between those two dumpsters back there is my bed, and that little stack of tattered books is my library. With a grim expression, Rock nodded in understanding. Makes living in a decanter seem like a lap of luxury, huh? Do you have any idea what it's like to have your head compressed in a vice grip for 70 years? Oh, well, do you have any idea what it's like going through life with a face that's almost completely burned off? Rock's jaw clenched as he sneered at Simon. After a moment, his expression softened. Yes, I noticed. How did it happen? Well, a few years ago, I was mugged on the street by 3 guys. One of them threw a jar of sulfuric acid at me. Simon waved a hand toward his face. After getting out of the hospital, I couldn't bring myself to go out in public, let alone back to work. My wife eventually left me. Not that I blame her. She was gorgeous. She deserved better. Anyway, you don't need to hear my woes. Long story short, I lost everything and ended up here. Simon paused and lowered his head. I'll probably die in this alley, with old Ralph back there. Rock gripped Simon's shoulder. I can see that you have suffered great loss and indignity. While I'm not a genie, I cannot grant you 3 wishes. Perhaps I can be of some assistance. What do you want most in this world, Simon Ramirez? What do you think? I want my life back. Rock placed his hands on both sides of Simon's head. So be it. As you have liberated me, so I free you from this tribulation and restore life to what was your life to what it was before the attack. You can do that? But wait, if you send me back, who will let you out of that decanter? Rock flashed a knowing grin. Let me worry about that. The warlock muttered a brief incantation in a strange tongue that conjured impressions of ancient and omnipotent power in Simon's mind. He began to tremble. Tender, welcome tranquility enveloped him, and he gasped as it filled his entire being, until he thought he would burst from sheer ecstasy. Rock's hands slipped away, and Simon felt himself tumbling backwards, falling. It was morning when Simon awoke. He opened his eyes, expecting the usual sights of graffiti-covered walls, fly-infested dumpsters, and open sky. Instead, he gazed at a white ceiling and 4 walls of warm peach. The air was redolent of sweet vanilla. Beside him, someone breathed, Lightly, rhythmically, he propped himself up on his elbows and looked over at the woman. Gwen. Gently he stretched an arm over his wife, pulled her close, buried his face into her soft strawberry hair. He pulled back, afraid she might turn and see his face. My face. Simon slipped out of bed and hurried into the bathroom. He stood before the mirror, gaping at his reflection. His perfect reflection. He did it! Simon stared at the hazel eyes, unblemished skin, angled jawline, all just as they were before the attack. This is amazing. Who did what? In the mirror, Gwen stood in the doorway, her hair like wildfire, eyes puffy. Simon turned to her and smiled. Nothing, just a thing, a work thing. You look gorgeous. Gwen raised an eyebrow. I just woke up. I look like I was hit by a train. She made her way out to the hallway. I need coffee. Simon hurried after her. Wait, what's the date? Gwen frowned. It's Saturday, September 3rd. Ah, that's a few days before the attack. Plenty of time. You want coffee? Gwen asked. Yeah, that would be fantastic. Do we have any plans today? Not that I know of. Good. I have an errand to run. This time, he saw them first. In the supermarket parking lot, Simon pretended to adjust grocery bags in his trunk. He was merely stalling for time, waiting for the three men to make their way over to him. Correction, 2 men and a girl. And she was the one carrying the jar of acid. It had happened so fast last time that Simon didn't get a good look at them. He reached into his coat pocket, curled his fingers around the grip of the .45 caliber semi-automatic he'd bought 3 days before, felt the curve of the trigger against the tip of his forefinger. My turn, assholes. Excuse me, sir, one of the men called. You spare a few dollars? Simon backed away from his car. He slammed the trunk closed as a distraction and pulled the gun from his pocket. I can spare a few bullets. For a moment, no one moved. Now what? Simon taunted. Who wants to make the first move? The girl tipped the jar in his direction and drew her arm back. Simon took aim at her. Not this time, Chiquita. At that, one of the men bolted. Distracted for a moment, Simon was oblivious to the pistol that suddenly flashed in his peripheral vision, until it was too late. The other man pulled the trigger, twice. Simon felt the burning impact in his chest and stomach. He stumbled backward until he fell against the SUV in the adjacent parking space. Shit, someone's coming. Let's get out of here. As the attackers ran off, Simon slid to the ground and lifted a bloody hand from his chest. Ever considered that they might have been armed with anything more than acid? Dumbass. Footsteps scraped to a halt beside him, and Simon turned his gaze to a familiar face looming over him. Hands clutched the front of his jacket and yanked him to his feet. Selfish, ungrateful buffoon! Rock tightened his grip on Simon's coat and backed him against the brick wall. Good thing for both of us, that was only a test run. Simon gaped at his raised hand. The blood was gone. He pressed his fingers to his chest and stomach to find them completely unscathed. I'm alive! His awe turned to disappointment at the sight and stench of his filthy clothes. His shoulders slumped as he took in his surroundings. Back to the hellhole. Simon frowned at the warlock. What do you mean, test run? Everything you just experienced happened only in your head. I used your memories to recreate your wife, your home, your neighborhood. I wanted to observe what would happen before committing to anything. Rock released Simon with a shove. You chastise others for their wasteful ways, yet you would so easily throw away your own life for petty revenge. If any members of my coven learned that more people died because of my meddling, never mind the decanter, they'd stuff my ass into one of your sippy cups. I'm sorry, Rock. Look, give me another chance. You showed me the error of my ways. I won't make the same mistake again, I promise. I know what I need to do now. Please, send me back for real this time. Rock responded with a dismissive wave and began pacing the width of the alley. Finally, he turned to face Simon. Are you absolutely certain I can trust you? Understand that my future is on the line as well." With a solemn expression, Simon raised a finger to his chest. "Cross my heart and hope to, not die." "Do not try my good nature, Simon. Know that I will hold you to your word." The salesman behind the counter smiled as Simon approached. "Ah, Mr. Ramirez, how are you today?" "Fantastic, George. Looking forward to getting my new shiny." "Of course." George gently laid the hard plastic case atop the glass counter and opened it to reveal a Smith & Wesson .45 caliber pistol. Simon nodded. "She's a beauty. Is there anything else I can get for you today, sir? Perhaps a box or two of rounds?" "You bet. Oh, and where can I pick up a bulletproof vest?" Ralph hurried around the corner and pressed himself against the wall of the pizza shop. After catching his breath, he turned and peered out onto the sidewalk, now illuminated by the gambling flames of the burning delivery van. Assured that no one had followed, Ralph started into the alley, but halted as something rolled out in front of his feet. "Pick it up, Ralph." A deep accented voice entered his mind. Ralph looked around, but saw no one lurking about. Curious, he snatched up the purple sippy cup and held it out beside the bottle of vodka in his other hand. "Fancy drinking tonight." With a chuckle, Ralph carried them both toward the back of the alley. It seems that neither warlock nor human learned their lesson.